live with Expansive and Unscripted. I'm Jennifer Allenbaugh. My pronouns are she and they, and I'm excited to be here with Leandra Stanley, whose pronouns are also she and they this morning. It's morning where I am. And I'm trying to remember, Leandra, I think we met like through, was it Raven Solomon's DEIER?
Yep. The where
Awesome.
I still tune in every week when I like if I can.
Yes.
Oh, so good.
Yes, I'm like, no, nothing else can happen Friday mornings because that's my time with Raven and all the people. Like it feels like community now, even though we can't chat in that space. I'm like, oh, here's my friends who are like my DEI friends. So yeah, that's where we met, and then we connected outside of that. Leandra is a Black, genderqueer, neurodivergent, fat, and disabled, and super passionate about equity, dogs. Ooh, me too. Taking naps, also me too, and seeking joy. So we're like total neurokin here.
Mhm.
She's currently the director of diversity and inclusion at a tech company and is a co-host of a new podcast called DEI Unmasked Conversations That Bridge. That's right. I watched that the other day. Okay.
Mhm.
They're from Portland, Oregon, and lives with her partner Bee and their cat Nala. And she's very proud of her houseplants, her penmanship, and her openness. Ooh, I would love to see some of your penmanship someday. I mean, like post a picture of a handwritten.
It's serious business. I try not to brag all the time about it, but like every time that I submit a form for like the doctor or something, like I am almost like, oh, how dare you when they don't comment on my handwriting because I've spent my life having people comment on my handwriting. It really just
Right?
feels like a special little thing because everybody's handwriting looks so different and you never know because sometimes you look at a person and you think they're going to have beautiful script and then it's not as beautiful as I envisioned.
Yes. Well, and it's such a, I mean, it's like one of our dying arts, right? Like seeing people's handwriting. Um, yeah, I just like I miss it sometimes. I'm like, oh yeah, handwriting, because I'm so used to just seeing text fonts on screen. And yeah, I used to lead some writing circles, like creative writing circles,
Mm.
and most of us wrote by hand, and it was just neat to like have that analog experience of all of us writing in our, I don't know, like just writing in our own handwriting, and I don't know, it just felt like a different way to experience people's writing
Yeah,
through their penmanship.
yeah, it's so interesting. I feel like I mean I don't know how much I learned because I'm not like a handwriting analyst, but like I feel like I learn a little bit more about a person by seeing what their handwriting looks like. And also it just feels so personal that way because like anybody can choose a font. Like I could choose Arial Narrow and then, you know, that whatever I write is mine, however it looks the same as anything else. And then it just feels so good to see handwriting, but also since I've gotten so used to typing and texting, sometimes when I have a writing circle or I'm writing down a prompt, my hand starts hurting so fast because
Yes.
I'm out of practice. And so it's like I want to make sure that I don't lose this thing and I know that I will, you know, continue knowing how to write, but like it doesn't feel as natural to me anymore. And I didn't really realize that until I was writing thank you cards for the holiday season that like, oh no,
Mm.
this isn't usual to me anymore. And I want to maintain that skill that I adore so much. So now I have, you know, small goals to do more handwritten things, whether it's just sending a little postcard note to a friend, or if it's, you know, just writing more notes down in general. It just I want to keep that momentum and not lose just the muscle memory of handwriting stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like my just kind of own note handwriting is more messy, but like I have my like fancy font handwriting when I'm writing a card to somebody or something. And I always remember like it was a big deal in my home growing up because my mom's like her penmanship is just like calligraphy,
Mm.
and like it's beautiful, and like people have hired her to address their wedding envelopes. She's like the
Wow.
writing. right? It's like, I'm like, okay, well, not gonna get there, but but she's like, yeah, I just decided one time when I was younger, I was like, I just want really flourishy handwriting. So she like practiced until that was the norm. And I was like, okay, that's amazing. Like, that's really cool. I don't have that same drive about penmanship, but like, I have, deep dive into plenty of other things.
Yep, we've all got our thing, and handwriting is one of them. I'm not very good at calligraphy and like in cursive. Oh, excuse me as I knock things over on my desk. But I practiced forever getting good at handprint because I'm also left-handed, and the way that I learned things when I was a kid was by trying to mirror what they were doing. But then right-handed people trying to mirror what they're doing when you're left-handed, you write a lot of things backwards or flipped, and so I was like, I'm gonna try really hard to make sure that I am both like writing and like in a way that implies that I am literate, but also in a way that just like looks better than what people expect of left-handed people, especially. And so
Mm.
it's interesting that it's like I'm left-handed and you think I'm gonna have terrible handwriting? Not today. As my first little moment of revolution as a child when I was writing in mirror form, trying to mirror what right-handed teachers were telling me.
That's amazing. Well, and you're right. I mean, there's still so much weird discrimination around left-handedness that, it's like, I'm right-handed, so it's not top of mind for me. But whenever I am talking about this with friends who are left-handed, I'm still so surprised that, like, how do we not have more instruments that are developed specifically for left-handed people? Like, they've been around since the beginning of time, but we also know, like, so many identities and ways of being that have been around since the beginning of time are not always honored as such.
Yeah, it's just so interesting. Like with left-handedness, I mean, it is parallel to so many things that are happening in terms of society, politics, etc. But like, I am left-handed for sure, but like, I also have been required to learn how to do so many things right-handed because, like, even when it comes to like scissors, it's like I'm trying to wrap presents for the holidays, and I'm trying to use a pair of scissors, and I'm just tearing through paper when I'm seeing other people just zhoosh, like right through the wrapping paper. And it's so interesting to know that there are so many things that I need to adapt to be able to use. But
Mm,
then there are also, there are all of these statistics about how left-handed people are more likely to die in a medical situation due to not having tools that that are, that you can use with your left hand. And so it's just interesting the ways that we are required to adapt just when it comes to left-handedness.
mhm,
And like, yeah, I do have a right hand, so I can use it for things, but it is not my natural path. And so there are so many things that I've had to just kind of stumble through with my right hand because that's the only option. And then I learned that there are left-handed scissors out there, not in many places, but like, wow, I was like, how accurate and quick this process was using tools that are actually meant for the way I naturally do things. Wow.
it's 2024, and I mean, I think about what, like, how articulately you just laid out the whole, like, experience of masking as a late identified neurodivergent person. And, I mean, there's multiple layers right here in masking around Blackness, masking around neurodivergence, masking around queerness, masking around disability. And, like, that being required to perform, neuronormativity or whiteness or abledness or straightness, that results in, what a lot of people call high functioning neurodivergent. And well, I have a lot of feelings about that, but I just kind of want to bring that into the conversation as we're talking about, like, the ways we've had to learn to kind of twist and contort ourselves to be, like, acceptable to society. What are some of your thoughts about, I don't know, any of that?
Yeah. I think that high functioning, low functioning is such problematic ways to talk about people with different brains in general. I know that there are a variety of ways to talk about folks, but I think that because of the like unspoken rule of needing to mask and just knowing that if I am showing up truly and authentically myself, often it is I wouldn't say it makes people uncomfortable, but I'm operating with a slightly different user manual than other people in the room, and I don't want to, make things weird, however that is. And so I think that so much about like my of excitement before about being labeled as high functioning was that I have not only like tricked these people around me to thinking that I am like, that I function at a high enough level to be worthy of whatever it is I think I needed to be worthy of, but also that like I'm not one of them. I'm not so disabled or so neurodivergent that, people are going to count me out or think that I'm incapable. And so much of it is trying to achieve like this perfect mask where nobody knows like I'm in disguise, and like that takes so much energy, and and then it's so hard to know, like, am I doing a good job at my job, or am I just doing a good job at tricking other people to thinking that I'm normal enough to be employable in general. And it's just like such an interesting like emotional, mental, and also often physical experience to be so hyper aware of surroundings. Yes, there's a whole bunch of nuance in human interaction in general, and people of all neurotypes are sometimes freaking out and nervous about human interaction, but there is something that is so calculated about about masking and code switching. And sometimes it happens naturally, but other times it's like I'm taking 10 deep breaths before I go into a room and I'm putting on the mask and I'm like, fake it till you make it, just smile and you'll get through it. And I didn't realize for so many years that this isn't what everyone is doing. Like there are
Mm.
like 1,000 different thoughts that are going into every interaction. I mean, there are, like, because humans have a lot of thoughts, but I feel like sometimes I navigate the world as like someone who's playing a video game, and then it's like someone has set a prompt. You have A, B, C, or D as an option to respond, and how you respond is going to change how this villager feels about you and whether or not they'll sell you their wares when you visit their shop again. And
Oh my
so,
goodness.
yeah,
Yes.
it's so interesting to just like to have high functioning. Like it felt almost like an award or a trophy or an accolade at first, but now I realize that it's another way to put a divide in a community that could be building together. And also like it makes people think that like high functioning people are more worthy, more anything,
Mm.
than people that need more support. And like low functioning, what a rude thing to call somebody. It's like this person is existing in the world. That is functioning. They may not function the way that you're expecting, but low functioning, what? But there are a lot of rude
Right.
things that people categorize each other in. Uh,
Absolutely. And, I mean, I'm continually in my own journey of like deconstructing internalized and learned ableism. And, I think before I fully came into awareness of my ADHD and autism, I definitely had some like stereotyped thoughts about like how to identify myself, or like where I wanted to be like how I wanted to be associated or thought of or perceived. And, there's part of me that looks back and I'm like, ooh, I'm kind of ashamed of that. And also I recognize like we are in this system. Like it's not possible to not have some internalized ableism having grown up within the system, because we are taught to think that way.
mm,
So the like that realization helps me to have like grace with myself in the process of unlearning that. But then I also think, these labels are harmful, of course, in all the ways that you shared. And also I think because there is this collective kind of this collective understanding of like all or nothing. And again, I think it goes back to like just so many rampant binaries in our culture that's either or. And I'm like, it's like, and also, um, right? Because I think when we function high in certain areas, then there's the assumption that we will function high across the board consistently every single time in every area of life,
Mhm.
right? And the same is thought about low functioning, that term, that it's like that person has low or no capacity for anything in any area of life ever. But the reality is that our capacity, our ability, our competence not only fluctuates from, subject to subject or task to task, but also within the task, depending on the day, depending on the other factors that are going on in our lives, depending on our physical state, right? Like, so I think back to so many conversations that I've had with, like, I don't know, teachers in education spaces around, like, I know you could do better than this. How come you're not performing? Like, you have performed in the past, your test scores have been high, and just like not understanding it is natural for humans to fluctuate in, in how they show up, and how they present. And often even more so for neurodivergent and disabled folks, that fluctuation is not laziness, it's not flakiness, it's not lack of commitment, it's that, like, we don't operate at 100% every single second of every single day in every area of life. That's not a human thing.
Right, it's impossible for anyone, first of all, but I think, yeah, it's really interesting to think about just like again, high functioning and like if someone is it has high support needs and they have a good day, it's like, are they really that disabled if they're able to have a good day sometimes? But
Yes.
then on the other side of things, I think that as someone who is so regularly labeled as high functioning, I'm wondering like, am I disabled enough to be considered a part of this community, or am I neurodivergent
Mhm.
enough to be, to claim this experience? Because there are people that I know who have experienced a variety of struggles or barriers that I have not had to look at similarly because of my high functioning or my high masking. And so often I'm finding like, oh, like I know that these diagnoses have been given to me, or like I have like first self-diagnosed and then have, consulted a friend and peer reviewed that neurodivergence is happening here.
Yeah.
But still it's like if I am able to do this and people are seeing me in a certain way, like am I enough a part of this community to really like claim it, put it on my profile, talk about it in a talk show with someone who is, an expert in this field? And like it's so interesting the amount of like imposter syndrome that I feel like is put on us by especially able people, because if you function well ever, you're not disabled enough, or are you
Mhm.
faking it? Like you should be able to be at, at this really wonderful best day ever version of yourself every single day, but that isn't realistic. And
Mhm.
I think that also when I was younger, before I had all of these words to describe my experience, I didn't know why I was not doing well sometimes in school. It's like there were certain subjects and certain classes and teachers where it's like I'm doing great, this I'm thriving. And then there are other times where it's like I don't know why I don't get this math class, but I am trying and I have a tutor and I'm doing all of this extra work and it's not clicking. But it was seen as a lack of initiative, a lack of, motivation, like you're just not trying hard enough, or like, but like I'm trying so hard and it's just not like the way you're teaching it to me is not resonating. And I promise you I'm trying, and like there isn't always something traumatic or something wild happening behind the scenes. It's like sometimes the way that a environment has been forged for learning is not meant for the people, like the learners within it. And instead of evaluating the environment or evaluating that there are different learning styles, it's just easy to assume that it is the fault of the person that's struggling. And so
Mhm.
for so long, I also was just like, why am I not getting it? It's probably because I'm not that
Yeah.
smart. But no, it's because I learn in some different ways than other people do. And knowing that now is so interesting looking back and like hearing all the commentary from teachers and fellow students about my quality as a social asset to my schools, but not necessarily as an academic one. And I feel like I was smart. I am smart, but like people don't know how to speak to folks whose brains work in a different way, especially if they've
Mhm.
only been taught to teach in a certain fashion. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
very complicated. Like there's like
Yes.
enough and not enough happening all at once. Like, am I a part of this community enough to speak about it, or should I kind of fade into the shadows and let other people who are more in my mind or in society's mind, um,
Mhm.
take the forefront? And so it's hard to know what spaces are appropriate for me to step into because of that odd way that people are quantifying things into this binary that I am somewhere in the middle of always.
Yes. I mean, I absolutely had those same conversations with myself and others of like, well, I don't know if I really count. And like, I remember talking to a friend of mine. I was like, I mean, maybe I'm just trying to like fool myself into thinking that I'm one of the cool kids who's autistic, but I'm really not. And they're like, okay, but like if you think autistic people are the cool kids, there's pretty much a 99.99% chance that you are also autistic. I was like, "Oh, I mean, really? That's so amazing." Like, yeah, it was it was just this different experience of, like you said, this imposter syndrome around, do I qualify to be part of this group? And part of that is like, I don't wanna take up space that is not mine, and
Mhm.
I wanna be mindful of that. But again, also, there are these, like, gatekeepy ideas from society. I know a lot of folks who are like ambulatory wheelchair users, and they're constantly talking about this, how people are like, oh my gosh, you stood up, like you're not, you shouldn't be having a wheelchair, or like, oh my gosh, you walked from your driver's seat to the trunk to get your wheelchair, you shouldn't park in the in the accessible parking. Just like, is this really what you want to spend your energy on, like policing and gatekeeping people for the tools that they use to make life easier for them, to make life well, and it's not even accurate to say to make life easier. It's to bring the difficulty level of life to an equitable place,
Mhm.
right? So it's just like, it just means I'm expending less on getting from the parking lot into the store if I use my wheelchair, so I have energy to actually do the shopping, right? And I think about this when I talk with people about, um, I mean, you and I have had conversations around like return to work mandates, and it's like, look, either I can expend my energy on getting ready to leave the house, transportation, navigating all of that, and like spending 50% of my energy bank before I even walk to my desk.
Mm.
Or I can work from home and put all of that energy into the job that I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah, it's that's the return to office thing is so interesting because I feel like it's an ever relevant topic, especially because we're still living in a pandemic, but people are going back to work.
Mm.
And it's really something like it's I have a lot of thoughts about this. Clearly, my brain is whizzing. It's there's so much effort that goes into being in the office. And yes, that is a part of what the former norm was when it comes to office work. But I think that also the former world did a really terrible job at including people who are disabled and neurodivergent. And there are people who didn't have work for barriers that were just surmountable, where it's like
Yes.
it's not like an undue harm for someone to have the equipment that they need to do work from where their body is the most comfortable. That doesn't seem all that outlandish to me. And this also, like, it's not just the disabled and neurodivergent community as well. There are caregivers, parents, people who just thrive working from home, or people who like to, I don't know, take a little nap during their lunch hour, but not in their office space or in their car in the parking lot. Like, there are so many
Right.
reasons why people thrive working at home. And I feel like especially the, like, people who literally can't go to the office, or who don't want to or can't make a 3-hour public transportation journey to be in the office where the air isn't regulated, where the sound isn't regulated, where there's so much external stimuli. Like,
Mhm.
being at home, you're able to really, as much as you can, depending on how many roommates you have or how many kiddos and dogs and etc. are around, like, you're still able to curate your experience more
Yes.
than you can in an office. And while I do, as an ambivert, extrovert-ish, really love that in-person, like, getting the vibe, hanging out in person, like, experience, there is something that's so, I don't know if profound's the right word, but that feels so affirming about being able to, come into my office in my apartment where everything is exactly where I'm expecting it to be,
Yes.
where, like, I choose the volume of everything, I choose how much light is coming into the room. Like, I mean, I can't decide what happens with the sun, but, like, curtains, blinds, etc., different lighting. It's like, I'm able to create an environment where I know that I'm going to thrive, not an environment where someone else is saying this is best for me and you're probably going to thrive because everyone else is doing okay. Like, it's so important to have that autonomy and that choice and just that consistency. And it's so
Yes.
interesting that there is this push to only build community in person in office, as though there haven't been people for, decades now, who have been forging giant, beautiful online communities and have friends
Yes.
that they've never met in person because of what being able to virtually work and build community, like what that has done for folks. Like, I'm connected
Mhm.
with people like you who I would have never met and never crossed paths with in an office in, Portland, Oregon. And I think that is such a wonderful testament to how impactful remote work and virtual work can be. And yet there's still this pull to just get people back to the office at, like, uh, no matter what, by any
Yes.
means possible.
Yes, absolutely. And when you were talking about having your desk the way you want it, it just brought me back to um, times where I've had shared office spaces, or sometimes even like, hey, this is your desk while you're here, but then like when you're not here, somebody else is going to use your desk space, and just like that feeling of, ooh, there's other people in my space and like messing around with my things, or somebody's like, hey, I was looking for a stapler, so like I went through your drawers, and I'm like, but that's private. What do I don't have anything to hide. There's like a bag of M&Ms in there, sure, help yourself. But like, it's just that feeling of like personal space being violated, and kind of intruded upon by others. And um yeah, I kind of lost my train of thought there. But yeah, I was just like, yeah, that's so valid. um
Like,
I
this
also
place is mine. Like, it's just like, it's not necessarily that it's like there's something that I'm hiding in these drawers, but
right.
there's something about the consistency of knowing that, like, even if it's a small little cube, it's like, this is mine. This is where my snacks, my monitors, like, I don't have to change any settings. Like, I just know that when I press the power button, or when I wiggle the mouse, or whatever, or when I sign into my station, whatever job you do, that this is mine and it's going to work how I expect it. I feel like
Yes.
there's just something, like, it's like someone has adjusted my chair. It's like the monitor is a little bit different, and it's totally not the end of the world, but it is going to take an extra half an hour out of my day to readjust everything back to the way that I need it to do my work best. And that's taking away from my energy, my spoons, and it's also taking away from the company. Or I'm spending more time than I want to be at work, or that I should be at work, because I'm just making sure that everything is still set up the way that I want it to be. Like, it's that ownership, that feeling like one space. It's like having your own little cubby or a locker somewhere. It's
Mhm.
like, this is mine. Whether or not it has a lock on it, that's my
Yeah.
assigned cubby. And maybe that's a little bit of the neurodivergence coming out, where it's like I'm very reliant on some routines where it's like I know where the thing is. It's organized chaos for me, but like it's always right there. So that's where I'm gonna put it. And like not having that and knowing that things are going to be different every time you show up. That's really stressful. And I
Yes.
don't think it's just stressful for neurodivergent folks. I think it's stressful for
Right.
a variety of people. And it's so interesting to not have that consistency and have us like go towards just like hoteling offices where like wherever you can find a seat is where you're sitting today. Whew.
Yeah, when folks talk to me about that, when they say like their office is kind of first come, first serve, like I have a somatic panic response to their experience imagining the stress of that. And I think what you said is so important, and it goes back to something you said earlier about, yes, everyone can experience stress about their space, being different when they return. But I think what's different for many neurodivergent folks is that the stress of things being out of order is debilitating. Like it's not like I feel like I've been told so many times in life, like, just suck it up, like,
Mhm.
deal with it and move on. But the thing is, our brains process that experience differently. And the intensity to which we experience stress is often, like maybe the baseline for, it might stress out a neurotypical person or an allistic person, non-autistic person, to like a level 2 or 3 stress.
Mhm.
It will likely stress me out to like 10 to 15 level stress, to the point where I'm so distracted by the thing being out of alignment that I can't focus on what I'm supposed to be doing. And that's the debilitating part. It's this problem interrupts and interferes with my ability to do the other things that I'm trying to do. Just like for some people, getting out of bed is level 15 intensity of this is this is hard. This isn't just like, oh, I'm sleepy and I don't want to get out of bed. It's intense and debilitating to a degree where it interferes with other other tasks of just like trying to be alive and move through the day. And I
Mhm.
think that's where I can get frustrated when people are like, well, like everyone's a little autistic, everyone gets awkward around other people, or everyone gets nervous about this, or everyone like, you know, practices to themselves things that they want to say. And that is a true statement. And also, again, like the degree to which neurodivergent people experience that, or even disabled people experiencing, things like the energy expenditure of having to walk upstairs versus being able to walk up a ramp or ride an elevator, right? It's taking away from the already limited reserve of energy and resources, and it's disrupting and interrupting. I think
Mhm.
about I don't know, it was like last summer or something. There was a house right around me in my neighborhood that was getting a new roof. And it was just like days of like the sounds of them untiling the roof and retiling and like the nail gun. I don't know. I was just like, oh my gosh, this is all I can think about and all I can listen to. And then that house got done and I was like, oh thank God. And then not 2 days later, the house next door got their roof. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna lose all of my sanity right now. And again, it's like people will say things like, well, yeah, I mean, that's annoying to everybody. I'm like, but does it halt your day? Does
Mhm.
it halt your ability to function? That's the difference for
That
so
is
many
the
of us.
line. That's the difference. And it's so like I always find this area of like again going into like the concept of masking. I'm thinking about how sometimes my mask is like trying to force itself on, where it's like I'm overreacting. I'm overreacting. Other people think I'm overreacting. I must be overreacting, right? Like, just suck it up. It's gonna be fine. But like my body is reacting. I'm already in it, and then there's this voice that's trying to convince me that like everybody would be inconvenienced by this. You're just too sensitive. And so it's so interesting when people talk about being a little bit ADHD or being a little autistic or I have a little bit of OCD. It's like, oh, I mean, if you really think you do, then maybe talk to a professional or to your peers about it and see like if you mean that. But like when I say that like this thing is like bothering me and like my core, like I feel it in my body, like it's not just a mild inconvenience that I'm overreacting to. It's like it's a sensory overload. Like the roof nailing is in my skull. Like it's like even if
Yes.
it's like it's a block down, like yeah, but it's in my room though. Like I can feel it, or it's like I can't focus in a Zoom meeting because my sock is weird. Like, yes, that discomfort is uncomfortable for everyone, but for me now, that's the only thing that I can think about, and it's just like that hyper focus, that complete derailment that happens is really the difference. And I think that
Yes.
it's so interesting that people don't, well, not all people, but people don't want to be considered a part of actual, of neurodivergent groups. But then they're like, but everyone's a little bit this. So like they use the community, but not being a part of the community as a excuse for some of their behaviors, but they don't want to actually claim being a part of a community just a little bit autistic like that. What are you doing? It doesn't make any sense. And people react in a variety of incensed ways, but I think that I know that there's something different between the mild inconvenience of something that's annoying that everyone might be annoyed by, and then feeling like everything has changed, or like I cannot make it
Mhm.
past this hurdle. It's like it's this is the thing, and I like like the anxiety, it just
Mhm.
it's different. It's
Yeah.
all consuming, and it feels so strange to have folks so casually just be like, everybody's got a little bit of this. Like, I mean,
Mhm.
I don't know about that.
Yeah, not so much. And something you said brought up another thing that I was thinking about. You talked about how, like, not only are you navigating your own thoughts and feelings about what's happening, but also, like, you're being mindful of, like, "Oh, am I being, like, dramatic and other people are going to be frustrated with me about this in the moment?" So we have to regulate our internal experience as well as our external experience of, like, how is my overload impacting other people, and are they gonna be like, "Oh my gosh, you're so annoying," or "You're so frustrating, being so dramatic and having a meltdown." And again, that that takes away energy from actually, like, regulating ourselves. If I can feel safe enough to be like, "Hey, person who's in my space, I need a moment to just bring myself back to baseline, and then I can answer your question, or then I can tend to your needs, but, like, can you give me a moment?" And I think that also shows up when we're talking about remote work. I don't know, I think about some of the fidget or STEM things that I do, like clicking pens, and that's really annoying to other people to listen to, like, clicking pens. But if I'm doing it absentmindedly, I'm not noticing it.
Mhm,
And so I think about things like that in a remote setting too. I feel more free to do some of the things that my brain and my body need to do
mhm,
without having to be thinking about regulating my external space and, like, how am I going to be perceived in this moment that I'm doing a thing to cope or, help myself out. And also, I don't have to be thinking of and, like, trying to manage the experience of other people in that same way, in addition to like, I don't perform well when there's an like when I'm being watched,
Mhm.
right? And that, I think that's another piece of like arguments for returning to office is like, well, so we can, make sure that we can supervise. And there are folks that I know who have talked about having like screen recorders on their computers recording every single thing that they do, and that's so completely distracting to their work because they're like, oh my gosh, like, did they notice that I like misspelled that, and are they judging me because I had to like correct that like just average word that I misspelled randomly,
Mhm.
or just all kinds of things. That's like, I don't know that anyone performs at their best when they're under a microscope, having to think both about their inner experience and their outer experience. Well, maybe not both, all inner experience, outer experience, and also the experience of others in their proximity.
Oh, man. That's a lot. That's a lot to think
I felt
about.
that sigh in my bones.
Yeah, it's so real. There's since I've been working remotely since we got sent home pre-COVID. I think that I hadn't really considered how much like stimming, like because you only see what's happening here, and like sometimes it's like I'm tapping my feet. I've got this little reversible burrito that turns into an avocado that I'm
Oh my
always
god.
flipping inside and out, and it's like I'm always
What?
fidgeting with my hands. But if I was just like if I brought a plushie into a conference room and was just like fidgeting around and like holding on to my burrito, like that would people would probably think that was a little bit weird or eccentric, and it's just like there's so much about the way that we're able to curate our experience from home, and yeah, being watched is really overwhelming. I feel like even when I like share my screen for a brief moment, it's like suddenly I don't know what my password is. I can't even type www dot. It's like I'm all over the place, and that's just a really acute moment where I'm expected to do one specific thing, and suddenly it's like I don't know how to use a computer that I've been using for the last many years. And so when I
Yes.
think about being under surveillance, I think like people are not going to go to the bathroom as often. They're not going to get that stretch break
Right.
they need. They're not going to go get another, glass of water, because there is this idea that like anything that they do that's taking care of themselves is of detriment to their work. And like how long is too long to take a break? Or is it weird if I take my lunch break 30 minutes after I took my 15-minute break if I'm just having a rough day? Or like what if I'm, there are just so many different things that become burdensome or become,
Mhm.
you know, detriment to people that are being surveilled. But then when we're in, like when I was in the office before, it's like there are some people who went out for smoke breaks or coffee breaks or whatever, like all like so many times, and it's like, oh, they're in the little coffee area again, like that's a lot of coffee to drink. But like you're able to get up and do whatever without people really worrying about you unless you're gone for hours at a time. But then the idea of being on camera, I mean, it's similarly to like flexible time off policies versus having a PTO bank, where it's like once you're given either a too broad of freedom or too much of management, people really perform differently. And now nobody's taking time off because they're wondering like, is this too much time off? Have I gotten one too many glasses of water today? Like standing up at my
Yes.
desk shouldn't be the end of the world. But when I think about being on camera or being like surveilled in some way, like I become so much more awkward and much more nervous. And it's like now I don't know what to focus on because I'm imagining how these people are measuring me without knowing what the
Yes.
expectations of the surveillance is it a matter of me being at my desk? Is it a matter of measuring productivity? And how are we measuring productivity? Because my most productive brain is between like 9 a.m. and 12 p.m. and then again at like 3 to 6. But like I have a little slump. It's like don't get me too early, don't get me too late. And like if I'm being surveilled, being like that is not conducive to the normal workday expectations. Who,
Mhm.
yeah.
Ooh, yeah. I, I mean, maybe there's some people who thrive under the microscope, but I have yet to meet them. If you're one of those people who thrives under surveillance, let me know. I would love to chat with you and learn more about what that's like.
Truly.
So
I'm so curious. Like I really like both in like a sarcastic way, like what's that like, but also like truly, like
but for
like
real,
how
like
do you
tell me.
thrive? Tell me more because that is so opposite of how I experience being watched in any circumstance.
Yes. Oh my goodness. So before we wrap up today, we have a few minutes left. I want to ask you what kind of hopes and dreams do you have? Well, this you could answer a number of ways, like, personally for 2024 if you want to. The first part that came to my mind is like, what kind of hopes and dreams do you have for like neuroinclusion and neurodivergent culture in 2024? Like, what would you like to see kind of happening in the world around neuroinclusion?
Hmm, that is a good and big question. I would like to see neurodivergent folks not being treated like a monolith. I think that we talked a lot about this and this, like you're high functioning, you're low, everybody else just isn't neurodivergent, I guess. I would
Mhm.
love for people to be more aware of nuance and also more aware of intersectionality, because I think that it's like you can be black or queer or neurodivergent or disabled, but God forbid you're all of these things. And how can that be? And how do these identities interact with each other? And how do these, intersectional marginalizations really impact each other? I think that I would like to see the conversation go towards the whole person and how neurodivergence is one part of our experience, but that is not the stamp of who I am. It is just a part of who I am. So I would really like the conversation to go beyond just neurodivergence, but I would also like for people to just talk about it more and not just talk about it in a like everybody's trying to be neurodivergent. Like if more people are coming out as neurodivergent, perhaps it's because people are feeling more comfortable and feeling like they have the language to explain their experience, and we should believe them. So I would like to see, like, it's an ideal world, like more acceptance and more acknowledgement of people's lived experience, but intersectionality within that would be great. Yeah, it's a bit broad, but that's what I'm dreaming for in 2024 and beyond, I think.
I love it. And it's absolutely something that we should be striving toward. Um, yeah, I love all of that. And I love asking people like big audacious dream goal things cuz
Mhm.
I am someone who believes that it's possible to build some of these things that we haven't yet experienced maybe, but like it is possible. I think that's one of the things that I can struggle with too as being a more like visionary type neurodivergent, whatever my collection of neurodivergences. I have a capacity to see what could be about a system or an environment. And I know not everybody has that gifting or strength. And that can present challenges where, like you said, something about like just believe people when they're telling you about themselves. Like, believe that some of us can have the capacity to vision a new way of being collectively that is like preserving the dignity of one another, that honors the agency of one another, that puts value in the credential of lived experience,
Mm.
as like just as top notch as, or maybe more so than a degree, right? Like it's a super valid credential, certainly outside of like white supremacist culture. And yeah, so I love listening to people's like when we give ourselves permission to dream big and like I don't know, I might not see it in my lifetime, but if I can contribute some things to where like maybe the next generation can bring that forward, then that is like, at least for me, that's a useful use of my time here.
Yep, I totally agree.
Well, thank you so
Collective deep
much.
sigh.
I know. It has been such a joy to talk with you, Leandra. I've loved this conversation. I love every conversation I have with you. And I'm so grateful that you were down to join this. Part of my hope for this talk show is that we are creating a space here for talking about
Mm.
these things and creating opportunity for other people to listen in to our unscripted conversation around, like, hey, this is how it is for us. And I think absolutely the more we do these kind of conversations, the more we normalize this reality. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for
And
having me.
yes, folks out there in social media land, we will be back at it again next Thursday, and we will see you there. Bye.
Bye, y'all.